Good morning. Did I do that okay? I'm a gong virgin, so this is my first time. And I also have to say I love following somebody like Dan Moulthrop, who is probably one of the best speakers I've ever heard, so this is really awkward. Hello, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Rob Falls, President and CEO of Falls Communications. We're also honored to be among the City Club's many corporate sponsors. It is a very exciting time to be part of this outstanding organization. You will see a lot of changes, a lot of good things coming out of this tremendous club in the future, near future. So please keep your ear to the ground and listen to what's happening, because this is a great time to become a member. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce the next speaker in our Business Leader Series, led by Huntington Bank, who is, with Dan Walsh, one of the greatest jobs of community involvement I've seen in a long time. This Business Leaders Forum is designed as a timely and engaging series that invites local, national, and global leaders within their industries to join in the conversation with our region's corporate and civic communities. Our 2014 programs are focused on some of the tipping points we are realizing in our greater Cleveland community. Let's be real. Detroit. I'm from Detroit. I've only been here since 1989. My wife's going to kill me. Today, Cleveland has extensive development in various phases along the waterfront. You've all seen it. It's very exciting. New construction projects are happening throughout downtown. Buildings being converted to accommodate the explosive growth in our downtown residential market is everywhere. New retail is popping up every time you drive down the street and you see a new store or restaurant. And the state is poised to invest $350 million in Opportunity Corridor. This is pretty gosh darn exciting. This type of real estate development has become a catalytic transformation of our city. This is something that our speaker today is intimately familiar with. Ron Ratner is President and CEO of Four Cities Residential Group and Executive Vice President of Four City Enterprises, a position that he has had since 1988. As many of you know, Four City began in 1920 selling materials to contractors. It wasn't long after that they went vertical into the real estate business. Ron also is on the board of The Ohio State University, and he just informed me that he spent more time there as a board member than he did as a student. Good Buckeye. Today, Four City has $8.9 billion in assets, with work in commercial development, residential, and master planned communities. It's very impressive, this big number. So this is a very big number, so let me give you a few projects, put this in perspectives, small things you might not have realized. The New York Times headquarters in Times Square, the Barclays Center, you know, where those Brooklyn Nets play, who we're going to kill next year, the Denver area Stapleton community, and the University Park of MIT. It's pretty amazing. However, they're going to make this year very financially viable with the expansion of Falls Communications, adding a fourth floor internal tower. Shameless plug. As a community, we're very proud to have this prestigious company located here. Ron Ratner runs Four Cities Residential Group, as I said. That designation doesn't necessarily speak to the vision he brings to some of the projects he gets his hands on. He says he likes doing projects outside because when he makes a mistake, he doesn't like to have those mistakes follow him home every night. I doubt whether, in fact, he actually makes those kind of mistakes because he's done it over and over and over again and very, very successful. Ron will start off with a presentation about his work in urban redevelopment and then continue the conversation with our moderator today, Jennifer Coleman, who is one of the nicest people I've ever met in town. Jennifer is a Cleveland-based architect and designer, founder of CityProwl, and the chair of the City Landmarks Commission. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce one of the great Ratner people, Ron Ratner.
Thank you for that introduction. Listening to that is kind of fun, actually. Thank you. And particularly listening to it from a tenant at the tower is even more fun. On behalf of Four City, I'd like to thank the City Club for asking me to speak. As a native Clevelander, it is truly an honor to be here and to be in this forum. I've spent a little time in your library, Dan, and looked at some of the minutes from early meetings, and they are very impressive. It tells us a lot about our city's history. And today I hope to speak a little bit about our city's future. I was asked to talk about transformational development projects and to share the lessons from Forest City's experience over the past several decades with complex, large-scale, mixed-use urban projects that we like to believe rethink, repurpose, reuse, and revitalize tracts of urban land. Can those lessons be applied to planned and future development here in Cleveland? For those of you in the audience here, you will also see a series of slides projected while I speak. Hopefully they will be somewhat related to what I'm discussing, but I generally won't be directly addressing them. So they'll just be sort of background noise and information. Hard to talk about real estate without some visuals, and hard to talk about some of the exciting things we've done without these visuals, but we'll get through it. Before I get further into my remarks, let me share some basic information on the projects I will be referring to. The first is Stapleton in Denver, Colorado. Stapleton, as some of you may know, is the redevelopment of the former Stapleton International Airport, which was decommissioned in the mid-1990s. In 2001, Forest City was named master developer, and we began construction of the first new streets, parks, homes approximately a year later. At more than 4,000 acres, Stapleton is the largest urban infill project in the United States. To give you a better sense of scale, and borrowing from a comparison made a number of years ago by the PD, if you took Stapleton and superimposed it on Cleveland, it would stretch from the Warehouse District to University Circle and cover everything from Carnegie north to Lake Erie. Another way to think about it is Shaker Heights is about 4,040 acres, at least as of Google this morning, and Stapleton is 4,000 acres. So it is a massive tract of land, and it was embedded right in the middle of the city. Today, Stapleton is home to nearly 20,000 people. There are more than 5,000 single-family homes, 1,000 rental apartments, over 2 million feet of retail, 400,000 square feet of office, and over 1 million square feet of flex industrial space. In addition, Stapleton already provides 500 acres of parks and open space, including an 80-acre Central Park, and 21 miles of bike and walking paths, 9 schools with a 10th under construction, 4 community pools, a public library, and a partridge in a pear tree. We actually did plant pear trees simply so I could have that line, but I can't attest to any partridges. We do have prairie dogs, no partridges. The primary planner for Stapleton was Peter Calthorpe, an extraordinary individual and somebody who's also become a good friend both personally and corporately. Peter's widely recognized as the father of the new urbanist school of urban planning, about which I'll say a little more later. I will honestly say that in close to 40 years in the business, there's nothing I am prouder of than what we've achieved at Stapleton. It's hard not to go there and say, wow, this is someplace very special. 2 other projects are worth noting in the context of today's discussion. The first is University Park at MIT, a 27-acre mixed-use tech office campus adjacent to the main MIT campus in Cambridge. Forest City partnered with MIT and with the City of Cambridge to develop University Park over a 20-year span, beginning in the early 80s. It includes about 1.7 million square feet of commercial space, as well as 700 mixed-income apartment units, a hotel, grocery store, and other service retail. The other project I'd like to mention is the Yards in Washington, D.C. This project, which we are actively working on today, is the redevelopment of the former Navy Yard along the Anacostia River, within walking distance of Capitol Hill. We are creating a new mixed-use neighborhood in what has become known as the Capitol Riverfront District, adjacent, by the way, to the new Nationals ballpark. We began infrastructure work in 2006 and opened our first apartments there in 2010. At full build-out, the Yards will include 2,500 residential units, about 2 million feet of office, and 400,000 square feet of retail and restaurants. And of course, a wonderful core urban park of about 6 acres. With that, let me turn back to our topic for today. Like many of you, no doubt, I am a native Clevelander, not from Detroit. I was born here in 1947 on the leading edge of the baby boom in a city that was then the 6th largest in the U.S., the heart of industrial America, and a community absolutely convinced of an unlimited future, linear path, continuous growth. Of course, we know that reality turned out very differently, as it has for so many cities, particularly here in the Midwest. The population of Cleveland peaked at just under 1 million people. Today we stand at just below 400,000. So faced with the reality of a shrinking city, Cleveland is very appropriately in a constant process of looking for ways to reinvent itself. Today, there's no shortage of worthy ideas, from lakefront redevelopment to reimagined public square. Just recently, 3 new plans intended to improve specific neighborhoods on the east and west sides received unanimous approval from the Planning Commission. One of the large ideas that was moving forward is the Opportunity Corridor, a proposed boulevard that would connect University Circle and a number of east side neighborhoods to I-490 on the west side, with development along the length of the corridor. Ironically, the antecedent of the Opportunity Corridor is a 1960s project some of you remember called the Clark Freeway, a superhighway that would have extended 490 from where it ends today at East 55th through the east side suburbs, ultimately connecting to I-271. One of the proposed routings would have taken this freeway right through the Shaker Lakes. It was great to have the publicly held land so you could use it for a freeway. Not surprisingly, the proposal met with significant opposition, including protests by a young high school student named Ron Ratner. I hope you'll see that slide. That actually was my college commencement, but I couldn't find one with my anti-Clark Freeway placard. It was the 60s, so come on, guys, it's really, give me a break. To be clear, the Opportunity Corridor as proposed is not the Clark Freeway. But if the Opportunity Corridor is to truly achieve the goals envisioned for it, it needs to be seen as much more than a road project. After all, roads historically have been barriers to development rather than facilitators. The challenge, as I see it, is for us to come together as a community around a shared vision and truly find the opportunity in Opportunity Corridor. Again, I'm not here to be prescriptive about how Cleveland should approach this or any other project. And I have no special insight or inside information on Opportunity Corridor or any of these other projects. I know what I've seen, heard, and read in the public record. My role today is to share some of the things our company has learned and that I've observed over a career of being involved in large-scale, transformative urban development. The first lesson we have learned is that community buy-in and a shared vision is absolutely critical. That's not something that a developer or a city or a government agency can achieve on its own. And it's not something that can be accomplished through a perfunctory series of community meetings. There needs to be genuine, broad-based engagement with representation from multiple segments of the community. In Denver, almost 5 years before the Stapleton Airport closed down, a group of civic and business leaders created the Stapleton Redevelopment Foundation. That group led a 2-year, broad-based, and inclusive planning process that resulted in a series of principles being codified in the Stapleton Redevelopment Plan, or what came to be known simply as the Green Book. By the way, this was before green and sustainability became synonymous. They just happened to pick green for the cover of the book. But working with the Green Book was a tremendous advantage for us. It was exactly what you wanted, in fact, for a project of this magnitude. It's a framework document with very strong principles that say this is what we want to do, but not precisely how they want to do it. While it does include everything from drainage swales to housing typologies, its true focus is on establishing 3 overarching principles: economic opportunity, environmental responsibility, and social equity. It became our touchstone for the project and still is today. I will tell one story about the Green Book. At one point I asked Council President Happy Haynes, an extraordinary community advocate and a church leader, how she viewed it. She said, "Young man," that shows how long ago this happened, "on my nightstand I have my Bible and my Green Book, and I'm not sure if there was a fire which one I'd grab first." She was serious. They worked hard on it and they believed in it. The second thing we have learned is that planning needs to be flexible and strategic rather than tactical. Put another way, planning should be descriptive, not prescriptive. It should define broad types of uses and priorities, but leave room for flexibility in responding to future changes. You can think of a plan as creating a framework or an armature, the way an artist might use an armature to create the basic form for a finished work of art. Why is flexibility so important? Part of it is a function of the timescale for large developments. They don't spring from the ground overnight, but extend over years and even decades. And you can never guess how the economy, technology, or demographics are going to change. There's a very good chance the use you plan for today will not be what the market needs or wants 10 years from now. Here are 2 examples of what I'm talking about from our own experience. When we began work at Stapleton, we were focused pretty much exclusively on residential neighborhoods. We did not initially expect there would be much demand for retail. We were wrong. Today, there's over 2 million feet of retail serving Stapleton and the surrounding areas, everything from fashion restaurants to grocery stores and service retail. Luckily, the Green Book and our actual plan was flexible enough to allow for expansion of uses and could accommodate the change. In Cambridge, MIT originally envisioned University Park as fairly low-tech incubator space, cinder block walls, two-story buildings, where engineering students and recent grads could try out new ideas and product concepts. In fact, the biotech industry didn't even exist at the time University Park was first conceptualized. When biotech burst on the scene, however, what we ended up developing was the most sophisticated office space in our portfolio, complete with advanced laboratories, state-of-the-art HVAC, and other features not even dreamt of in the original concept. I might add that the plan done by Coder Kim, won a PA Design Award at the time, is still the plan that we basically followed. If you look at it, you can see in that 1980s document the project that is now complete. Several large biotech and pharmaceutical firms, as well as a number of smaller companies, are the primary tenants at University Park, and we are under construction on a new building, 100% pre-leased, to accommodate the growth of one of our major pharma tenants. The next learning I'd like to share is that we need to rethink density as it relates to new neighborhoods. When I say density, it's not forcing people to live in high-rise buildings. At Stapleton, for example, there are about 7 units per acre in our residential development, of which 90% is single-family homes, a small component also of attached homes and apartments, none of which is over 4 stories. 7 units per acre. A more standard suburban development done anywhere in the country in the past couple of decades is more like 1.5 units per acre. Interestingly, if you do some basic math on the amount of new housing that will be needed to accommodate anticipated growth in the U.S. population, call it by 2050, and you base that housing on a Stapleton model versus the more traditional model, you would save something like 30 million acres of land. Think about it. That's 30 million acres that could stay in agricultural use, parks, open space, to say nothing of less infrastructure, fewer cars, and reduced sprawl. That kind of density also gets you walkability. At Stapleton, every resident is within walking distance of a school, a grocery store, and a park. We are close to the 30 people per acre density that supports public transit, and we now have bus access and we'll have light rail next year. People still have cars, but when you get home from work, you don't have to get back in your car to drive to the grocery store, pick your kid up at school, or go to a park. You may think that's not what people want. They want big backyards and privacy. Clearly, some people do. But Stapleton has been the top performing master plan community in Colorado and one of the 10 best in the country, virtually every year since the first homes went on sale. Incidentally, even for a project like the Opportunity Corridor, which is by definition linear, the principle of density can be applied as you think about developing individual nodes along its path. The last lesson that I want to draw from our experience is the critical need for connectivity. Any infill project, whether it's a single building, 2.5 million square feet built on 26 acres, or a community of 35,000 people built on 4,000 acres, is not an island and has to relate and integrate with its adjacencies. One of the ways to think about connectivity, density, and some of those other concerns I've raised is to put them into the context of the overall new urbanist approach to planning. The best short course on its principles is a series of ideas drawn directly from the work of Peter Calthorpe, the planner for Stapleton. Peter sets out 4 interrelated principles: scale, diversity and balance, sustainability, conservation and restoration, and human scale. Scale simply means that you have to consider the progression of concerns and needs from the region, through the district, down to the neighborhood and block, and then back again. Diversity and balance recognizes that single-use islands are bland, and ultimately fragile. They don't handle change very well. If you start out with a mix of uses and the world changes, the odds are much better that the development pattern and hard infrastructure can be responsive to the new requirements. Sustainability is a commitment to the efficient and effective protection and utilization of available resources, physical, financial, and human. Human scale requires a constant focus on the big and little details in buildings in the public realm that allow each of us as individuals to personally relate to our environment, break down the size of blocks, break down the components, break down the streets. While not articulated in such a precise and almost academic manner, these principles are embedded in each of the developments I've reviewed here today. Stapleton's basic plan is an extension of Denver's historic grid plan. Its boulevards and parks echo the best examples of the neighboring districts. The Yards in Washington celebrates its ability to connect Southeast DC and the South Capitol District to the reborn Anacostia River, the recently completed Yards Park, a 6-acre jewel that we constructed on behalf of the city that has become the heart of community life for a very diverse population throughout that region of Washington. The central public space in University Park evokes the form of an academic quadrangle and again forms the core of its micro-neighborhood, set among the largest concentrations of universities in the country. Each of these projects draws on the principles of connectivity, continuity, sustainability, and human scale that Peter articulates, and in so doing, not only succeeded internally, but became transformative for the adjacent neighborhoods. I should note that in different ways, each of the areas in which these developments were done was challenged, and in some cases, severely blighted, and both threatened and threatening. That's no longer the case. With that, let me turn to just a few observations about the Opportunity Corridor. As I said earlier, I'm not an expert on the project. I only know what I've seen in the public record, probably some of the same things many of you have read or heard. At its core, the corridor is a road project, conceived in large part as a more efficient and effective way to move traffic from University Circle in the heart of Cleveland's Eds and Meds community to the west side and beyond. It's really changed, however, and in its current form, it has the potential, the opportunity, if you will, to be much more than a road. The plan that is reflected in the final environmental impact statement describes a boulevard with flanking pedestrian and bikeways that has multiple signalized grade intersections with major and minor cross streets. Many of those cross streets lead north to the red line of the RTA and south to the green and blue line. Great access and connectivity through multiple modalities is vital to any transformative real estate development or any sustainable existing neighborhood, but it's not the end goal. It is hard not to get excited. I am a developer after all, guys, about the potential to work on those nodes created by these cross corridors, the transit connections, and to try to create vital triggers for both revitalization and new development. This excitement is magnified when you realize that some of our most vibrant economic drivers, the Eds, the Meds, and the cultural heart of University Circle, are just blocks away at the end or from intermediate street connections to the corridor. Some of the neighborhoods in Cleveland that have struggled and have survived are also accessed directly from this route. However, this excitement fades very quickly when you read the detailed brownfield study that meticulously delineates a series of superblocks on the land adjacent to the boulevard and populates them almost exclusively with light industrial and warehouse uses. To put it bluntly, we can and must do better. At the least, we have to try to conceptualize a more vibrant, denser, and stimulating program. As usual with this type of exercise, if we are to succeed, we'll have to begin by relaxing some of the constraints imposed by economic, political, and administrative realities, and let our imaginations run for a while. We can then reimpose the constraints and see if our vision holds up. A word of caution applies here. In the end, one of the most critical questions we need to answer as a community is not only what can be done along the Opportunity Corridor, but what resources of time, energy, and money we can allocate given our other priorities. As with all the exciting opportunities that we can envision for the major initiatives in our city, we will have to do what we have failed so often to do in the past and make hard choices. The good news is if we do the job right, create the right framework, and understand that its realization will take years or decades, we can succeed. I'd also note that while we are all anxious for immediate results, there's also the need to plan for the future and refrain from short-term solutions and land uses that will become impediments in the future. In some ways, we need to think like an institution. I'm also aware of the deep controversy that this proposal has generated in our community. Well-intentioned and committed individuals and organizations are on both sides. Some have hailed it as a visionary concept that can bring positive, transformative change. Others loudly warn that it's a waste of resources and a potential scar that degrades the adjacent neighborhoods and undermines the development of better transit alternatives. I hope nobody takes that quote and just quotes it. I'm somehow reminded of one of my favorite Dr. Seuss stories. It takes place in the undeveloped, wide-open prairie of Prax. and pits a north-going Zax and a south-going Zax in a face-to-face, belly-to-belly standoff. I hope you're looking at the Zax. The south-going Zax always goes south. After all, he's been to south-going school. The north-going Zax insists that he only goes north and must be allowed to go forth. They adamantly remain in their positions while a haphazard world of freeways, factories, and inexplicable Seussian assemblies rises around them. They look and are truly foolish. I believe it is a time for all of us who are interested in our city to back away from our entrenched positions. The Opportunity Corridor is funded and approved. It will happen. From curb to curb, its plan is set and is actually pretty good. The challenge is to find a common vision for what can happen in adjacent areas and neighborhoods. What is the opportunity? What is the process to achieve a shared vision? And what is a mechanism to achieve this vision? In conclusion, I thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for such a stimulating conversation, and also your thoughts and hopes for our fair city. The first thing I know, we talked a little bit beforehand, and one of the ideas that was just such a rich thought process was that you and the groups of developers have to plan for cities that you don't even know exist yet in your developments. And you also talked about the importance of community buy-in. So how do those two marry? How do you get the community on board that will be shepherding, living, buying, working in these neighborhoods to wait the 10, 20 years as these developments come to fruition?
Boy, I wish I had a magic bullet for that one. It's obviously very, very difficult. Part of it is it does start, and we've been very fortunate in so many of the major projects we've done. There was a community process that we stepped into. The community had recognized and gone through some of those painful times. It's also true that it's very difficult to tell anybody that things have to take time, that things have to wait. And we've certainly been benefited by being in economies that have been very robust. While we've been in, as I've mentioned, challenged and threatened areas of some of those economies, if you went into southeast or southwest Washington 20 years ago, I remember I first took my brother Chuck, who was then president of the company, to see our opportunity in Washington. And I was standing there with my cousin Deborah, who was running the Washington office, and we very carefully positioned ourselves so that he couldn't see the drug deal that was going down, immediately behind us. And I kept sort of moving over, and Deborah kept moving over, and it didn't fool Chuck for 30 seconds. But you're embedded in that kind of circumstance. So part of it is that, we found that people, if you're just honest with them, very honestly, are very realistic. They know, they've been there. These community leaders have been, and the ones who remain in these areas have been struggling for a long time. There's a lot of new energy as well. And they're, if you just are straight with them and say, this is going to take time. A great example of getting that kind of buy-in at Stapleton, we had to go out and bid for the project. There were 4 bidders. We went in and said, tell you what we're going to do. We want a 15-year development horizon to buy down the land. Because we knew if we bought the land up front, and we'd have this huge economic nut that we'd have to unload right at the very beginning, we'd have to do what a lot of developers do, basically a slash and burn process. We'd have to build what we could real fast in order to get the bank loan, even though Dan might have been nice and made a favorable loan, but we'd have to get the bank loan off our back. You had to go, and we didn't do that. We said, no, what we're going to do is, with your support, we have the right, we're going to ask for the right to buy down land over 15 years, to buy it incrementally as we used it. And we're going to pledge to you that we're going to then build quality infrastructure up front so that we can, in fact, get this done over time. Some of that was just being honest. We said it's going to take, it'll take 30 years to fully develop, but we said we wanted 15 years to buy down the land. So, some of it, I think, is just being honest up front, recognizing what the issues are. People are, everybody is looking a little bit for a magic bullet. I want to solve it now. I want something to happen today. But, the other comment I made earlier is, there was a time in America and a time in Cleveland and that we all had this sort of belief in the future. Things were going to be better. And therefore, we could allow the future to sort of unfold a little bit. We weren't running from it, we were embracing it. And I think part of that's just attitudinal change. You have to embrace it. So, I wish I had a straight answer. Some of it was just hard work.
Right. we talked about the idea of not all developments, and as we're starting to see development in Cleveland, everyone's looking at, all right, how does this filter out through the whole city? How do we have development going on all the time? And the thought of taking a moment in some areas just are not going to, don't have to be developed, whether they are part of a land conservancy, but if we don't have the idea, that's okay, that's a good thing.
Well, some of it is, yeah, you don't have to have all the answers now. You have to, you know, I mean, some of it is what doctors are told, you know, do no harm. Someone is saying there are clear resources that we have. Some we can use today, some we can bank for the future. You know, people in America did this for a long time. I recently went through this process in my role at Ohio State, and we did a master plan, and I got a chance to look back at some of the early plans. Remarkable people. You know, university of 1,500 people, and they were talking about campus needs for 100 years into the future. Not in saying we have to be careful not to overbuild in that area of the campus, because eventually there will be, you know, activity on Lane, which was a country lane. I mean, you know, you just have to get into that sort of mindset, and it's difficult. The other thing I'd comment about this is that you also have to be very, very careful, and I think we've learned some of our lessons about raising false expectations. In the real estate world, in the master planning world, it's called the celebration effect. Celebration, Florida was a community that was built adjacent to Disneyland. Great architects from around the world were gathered, and they built this wonderful and, in great respects, very nicely planned community. But they also kind of oversold it. You know, it was, after all, you know, a residential community done by Disney, so everything was going to be terrific. Well, you know, people moved in and they found out that, in fact, they still had a fight with their spouse. They still had to take out the trash. The kids still didn't get their homework done. You know, being in celebration didn't solve all your problems, but they had raised expectations so high that they couldn't possibly get there. So some of that, and we've been guilty of that. You know, in order to sell, I say we the development community, we the city community, the civic community, in order to get somebody's support for something, we've so oversold the damn thing that there's not a chance that people won't be disappointed.
Right. Maybe the name of the city should have been Managed Expectations.
Well, you know, but it's hard because you also got to get out there and be a little bit of a cheerleader. So.
It's interesting, the projects that you talked about with Stapleton, MIT University Park, which I think the name is bringing a little bit of science into the city. These are projects that have echoes in Cleveland. With the things that have been happening and the great development plans that we've been seeing executed and in store in University Circle, I think has that same idea of science, eds, and meds with residential contained inside of it. And even looking at the Yard and looking at maybe some of your projects in Pittsburgh of our riverfront development. And those are somewhat complex. It's great we're starting to see river and lakefront development in Cleveland, but those are very tricky projects. And just land control, which you talked about before, as being almost, well, definitely a key to projects. What advice do you have on some of these issues and things that we have to get through, such as building next door to an airport or underwater water rights and things like that?
You know, one of the things I will also add is that, you know, we were also very fortunate, not just fortunate, we went out and sought opportunities, obviously where land was where, you know, real estate starts. I mean, the first, you know, real estate is real estate, it's land. So having control of land is critical, and in each of these large projects, in fact, you know, there was a land assembly a land assembly to put together by either a private institution, MIT, or the combination of the GSA and the City of Washington, or this newly formed development agency in Denver. So obviously that's a huge difference. We don't really have single large controlled pieces of land, and yet it's interesting as you go through, and I might add, I read a lot of that brownfield study for Opportunity Corridor, and there are blocks that have been identified there that currently have, you know, 4% occupancy. You know, 30% of the land is in the land bank, which we very intelligently set up, probably 20 years late, but it's there and functioning. A lot of the land is vacant, and, you know, again, quick little web search, you know, available for sale. Even today, though people know that maybe there's some good things that are happening, people are willing. So, you know, part of it is we have to think about what are the other mechanisms for controlling land. But then you also think about the ways you can do overlay zoning districts. If you in fact lay out the right carrots and you say, well, here are the right things that are going to happen, people will get some of that stuff done. I think about the H Street corridor in Washington, the Shaw neighborhood, some areas where the city didn't have control of land, but was able to seed development, make special things happen, take advantage of a stop on transit, and therefore, Cleveland has an extraordinary group of local development talent, people who are very skilled at doing projects in the city. And my guess is if you gave them the right incentives and you showed the right, and they had the right support, they knew that zoning was there, they knew the other, the other processes would be supportive, that would help. The other problem is, you have to find a way to fund infrastructure. It's a huge problem. Our infrastructure is crumbling. How do you begin to attack that? So they're not easy, but, and then to the waterfront thing, Americans have this fascination with water. We can build a 4-inch duck pond in a residential development, and the lots sell for 50% more because people get to look at it. And without sort of being too cynical about that, it's also true on the other hand that we've throughout the country we've really abandoned the benefits of a lot of waterfront. I mean, historically, cities developed along rivers. That area was industrial. It was ports. It then became industrial. Then where were you going to put the road? So you put the East Side Highway, the West Side Highway. I was just in Boston yesterday. We had the grand opening for a new 28-story apartment building that we built right on the Greenway. I might add, it's the only building that will actually literally share property with the Greenway. Everything else is set back. The Greenway is literally just that. It's a Greenway that was put through Boston at, only Boston costs whatever, $10 billion and rising. But it basically replaced the Southeast Expressway and is allowing the city to reconnect. Although a lot of it doesn't run right along the water, it reconnects back to those water edges. Again, the Yards project is part of the Anacostia Waterfront Initiative. 15 years, by the way, in the planning. Talk about horizons. So that can happen, and we were successful there, and cities have been successful. But this draw of water is very significant, and we're fortunate in Cleveland. We've got a lake which is now a real feature again. We've got a river which works as a feature, and I think that's another place where, again, within that business of making choices and focusing, how do we begin to take advantage of that? It's not easy, but tough, decisions we need to make and questions we need to ask.
Right. You also talked about the talent of developers in Cleveland that actually is getting larger every day, and we're starting to see the benefits of some of these unique developments. For a city is a market or is a business that looks at high growth markets, like your Colorado, your Denver, Colorado, your Washington, D.C., your New York City. What's the difference of the type of projects and areas that you look at versus a city like Cleveland? What are the differences? What makes that high growth?
Again, I want to be careful with this one, but it's part of it is you have to be really good to be a developer in Cleveland. I think we're good. I think we're a great company. But in the markets we're in, you can afford to make a slight mistake. You can be a little bit off pitch. You can be a little bit earlier, a little bit late, a little bit bigger than you should be. And that rising tide will float that boat. You make a mistake as a developer in Cleveland, you're gone. There is no second chance in this city. And so the people and yet there are a lot of very substantial real estate development, families, companies that have been successful in Cleveland for many, many years. They learned how to navigate in this kind of water. The other thing that happens for us as a company is that in general, and right now given the scale and size of what could happen in Cleveland and what should happen, the projects are smaller in scale. And one of the things that we've learned about ourselves is that we're very good at big things, big, complex, and very honestly, we're a very high overhead operation. We've got a lot of great people, but a lot of great people and people that know how to solve big, complex, multiple challenges. But that's very hard to apply to a smaller project. I sometimes look at the agility and the speed and the compactness of some of the developers here in Cleveland, and I sort of envy them. I say, wow, I wish we could be quite that nimble. We are great at what we do. At least I think so. David's sitting there and smiling. I hope he thinks so. But it is something where you have to look at what is appropriate for what you do. And in every one, it's interesting. You talk about cities that are quote in decline or are growing. There are an awful lot of healthy areas around Cleveland. A lot of healthy things going on in the city. A lot of very exciting things. There are also areas of real challenge. You got to be careful though about everybody here would sort of say, well, Chicago's a great city. We've done some work in Chicago recently. just for what it's worth, 85% of the census tracts in the city of Chicago had a decline in population in the last decades. So, you know, you have to temper a little bit. Everything always looks a little bit better.
Right, and put it
Cleveland
in
looks pretty good when I come home. So.
Hi, I'm Dan Maltrip of the City Club of Cleveland. Today we're enjoying a special Business Leaders program featuring Ron Ratner, President and CEO of the Forest City Residential Group. He's in conversation with Jennifer Coleman, founder of CityProwl and chair of the Landmark Commission. We'll return to our speakers momentarily for the traditional City Club Q&A. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via our primary media partner, 90.3 WCPN FM, WCLV, and WVIZ PBS Idea Stream, or WTAM, or one of the many other radio stations across the country that carry City Club programs. Our television broadcast is on WVIZ PBS, and television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Next Friday, May 30th, please join us as the City Club hosts a panel discussion on creative minds in healthcare in cooperation with the Cuyahoga Partnership for Arts and Culture. For more information about our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. Today, we thank our sponsors of the Business Leader Series, including Huntington Bank, the Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Falls Communications, the Fredonia Group, Great Lakes Publishing, Inside Business, Level 7, Life Bank, Meaden & Moore, and Walter and Haverfield. We also welcome guests at tables hosted by our corporate partners, Forest City and Jones Lang LaSalle. Thank you all for your generous support. We welcome students to today's program as well. Student participation is made possible by a generous gift from the Charles E. Spar Charitable Trust. Today we welcome students from the Young Scholars Program of Ohio State University. Will the students please stand to be recognized? Now we begin the traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, members and guests alike. Holding the microphones today are Associate Director of Advancement, Mike Cromaldi, and Marketing and Outreach Specialist, Kirsten Pianka. Our first question, please.
Please consider running your new road all the way up 105th to Superior and then going east up Superior to Euclid, and then taking this incredible campus that includes Case Western Reserve University and two of the greatest hospitals on the planet, and making this a world-renowned center for biological research, genetic research, pharmaceutical research, imaging machine research, and everything else that's related to the medical industry. Thank you.
I'm not sure that was a question, but I'm also 100% sure that it's not my road. But, you know, obviously that opportunity is there. I think even where at 105th, it really opens up a huge opportunity. So.
If you talk about it, it's yours. That's how it works.
If you break it, you buy it. Don't want to break this one.
Mr. Ratner, thank you for your observations. My question relates to how important is it to have green space in dense urban environments, and I'd like to direct your attention particularly to an area that Forest City has put a lot of investment in, Public Square. And the area just west and to somewhat north of there toward the Rockefeller Building is kind of a sea of asphalt parking lots. I'm wondering if we should, as a part of our development, develop more of, if you will, a mini emerald necklace or more open green area in addition to the malls we have as we get into redevelopment of those areas.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, you'll actually notice, I actually, in reading my remarks today, noticed that I referred 3 times in talking about the 3 major projects that I referred to today to great open space, great public realm. Stapleton is, you know, we're actually increasing by about 40% the total park space in the city of Denver, city and county of Denver in that project. Even in a smaller project in the yards, the 6-acre park that we constructed with it really on behalf of the city, but it's in the core of our development, and it links to a waterfront initiative that will, you know, where now you can actually walk right. We just completed the bridge that takes you over to the ballpark, and as soon as we get the Navy to allow you to walk through the Navy Yard, they seem to have security issues. We'll be able to walk that way as well. But you know, public space, public realm is absolutely critical. You know, in Cleveland as a whole, we're very fortunate we have a lot of that. Downtown, we actually do. I mean, you have to think about how some of it tends to get knit back together. Is it accessible? How do people really use it? I'm really excited by some of the planning that I'm seeing for Public Square itself. because there's a lot of public space there. It's just not, one, it's not very friendly. I'll be careful, but with real respect to RTA, I wish that every edge of it weren't a bus stop. You need but you need to rethink that a little bit, and we are rethinking it. How do you? There's too much road surface in what is primarily open space. So how do you make that friendlier open space that can be used more? How do you think about some of the smaller parks? The small park right next to the library is an extraordinary public space. In good weather, I've lunched there. Walk over, grab some noodles, and walk over to the park. I mean, that's the kind. There's small jewels like that. I'm not sure that in Cleveland today that we're going to, other than some of the large existing spaces, we have an opportunity to create a big new central park for lots of reasons. I'm not sure we need it, but clearly, carefully considered public realm, public space, as you start to get to sort of finishing some of the flats area. I think there's some public space opportunities in there, shoreway areas. There, we've got to do it. It's critical. So I'm totally supportive. It's just how do you get it done and how do you maintain it?
Hi, my name is Evelyn Nunes Rodriguez, and I go to MT Squared STEM High School. How soon do you hope to see this project begin, and when do you estimate to see it finally come together?
Boy, talk about raising expectations. Again, fortunately, I have absolutely nothing to do with the Opportunity Corridor. There's some people in the room who do and have worked very hard on it. I know parts of it are beginning today. I mean, they end up at 105th Street, as I believe, if it's not already under construction, it's soon to be. Some of this will happen over time. Some of it will unveil itself. But again, the opportunity, the road part of it, I think, is pretty much funded now and is going to happen. And with some twos and fro's in there, I think that's probably short term. The question is, how does this other development that this thing spurs happen? What does it really do? And I think we got to double down, revitalize a planning effort, and then those projects, some of those could happen virtually immediately. There's some clear areas that are industrial that already have manufacturing, successful manufacturing. Yeah, clearly there's some places where that probably makes sense. There's some other nodes that clearly just jump up off the page. Other things might be years and decades into the future. It's going to be, that's why it needs to be a deliberative process, not just a, boy, you got to have it immediately. And then the other thing I mentioned is critical is we've got to put it in the context of, how much total energy do we have to do things in Cleveland, and is this where we want that to go? Do we reinforce the healthcare corridor? Do we reinforce what's already been done along Euclid? It's not like we're lacking for land to develop. So, how do we find the right ingredients of opportunity and place and timing?
Mr. Ratner, Forest City Enterprises was started in Cleveland almost 100 years ago, and your headquarters have been here in Cleveland during all those years. Many of your executives, most of them probably, live in the greater Cleveland area. As far as I know, your developments in Cleveland have included the Tower City development, and most recently, a modest housing development in Pepper Pike known as Sterling Lakes. And you described today some major developments that Forest City has participated in all over the country. I'm thinking of the New York Times building in Manhattan and others. And my question is, for your own hometown, Cleveland, can you tell us what kind of an enterprise you might have in mind for the future so that we could have some of those same kind of major developments that Forest City has done throughout the United States?
Yeah, it's a challenging question. It has been actually for some time for our company because, clearly, led by Albert, we did, the Tower City project 25 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. But it is probably the last major project of scale that we've done. In fact, I might add, I think it really was the first project of scale we did actually in the city. We grew up as a suburban developer. We grew up in Parma and in Euclid and in the communities surrounding Cleveland. And I think the tower was, if I'm not mistaken, Albert, the first major, and that was really saying we want to be downtown. We want to do something transformative in our own community. And probably 10 years after we did the original project, we moved our our company headquarters down to the tower, and we're there and we're excited to be there. The other question, though, is how do you look at what would lead you to want to do a major project in Cleveland? And part of that is a recognition that there's an opportunity that's at a scale and a character where we really think we can add value. I've mentioned before that we've been looking more and more at larger scale, complex projects. Atlantic Yards in New York is an example. A new project we're working on in San Francisco, the Pier 70 project, we hope will be about 4 million feet of space. Probably can happen over a 10 or 15 year time frame. That's the kind of thing we've gotten very, very good at doing. Very hard for us to look at these smaller scale opportunities that really present themselves in Cleveland and feel that we'd really add value to that. So it's not as if we're not going to look at it, we constantly do, but we've got a pretty set strategy that really we think advantages the things we do the best in the kinds of locations that allow us to do the kind of work that we do the best, and then to be supportive here in Cleveland and look at and see what opportunities are there. But so far we're just not seeing the kind of chance that really says this takes advantage of what you do so well. So I hope that's an answer.
Thank you for your comments earlier. You made an observation that when you came back to Cleveland, it didn't look so bad. And as someone who's traveled quite a bit around the country and looked at these other cities and lived in some of the first-tier cities that have the type of demographics where you'd find a forest city, I'm finding them to be so overcrowded at this point that my experience in traveling to and from these cities has not been good. What does Cleveland need to do in order to change its image and the perception of Cleveland so that we can reverse the demographic loss of population here and start having the type of growth in this market that would allow a forest city or an associated estates who's headquartered here as well to look at Cleveland as a place that would be viable to redevelop again or to pursue some development projects?
It's an interesting question because I truly have no answers. If I had answers, as part of this civic community, I'd have tried to bring them forth a long time ago. And I didn't. And when I said it doesn't look bad, in fact, it looks wonderful. Over the years, we've never had problems recruiting executives to move to Cleveland. We've been careful. We haven't tried to take somebody out of smaller cities, but you get somebody who's living an hour and a half out on the island, commuting back into the city, no time for personal life, living in a 2-bedroom bungalow. You trade them even up for a home, either older communities, east or west side, or new communities, east or west side. Tell them they can be 20 or 25 minutes from their office downtown, and with spare change, they can buy, season tickets to the orchestra or the Browns. That's a pretty good bet. So over the years, we've had a great time doing that, and I can make that argument very strongly. There are lots of impediments, however. Just recently, for instance, we've had an issue where prospective employees felt concerned because they didn't think that they could find a job for their spouse. 25 years ago, that wasn't the case in Cleveland. If we really wanted somebody, we could almost guarantee that somehow, through networking, we'd find a job for that trailing spouse. So there are those kinds of issues. Some of it just have to get back to bootstraps. The other soapbox that I sometimes spend some time standing on is that you have to really pay attention to this whole shrinking cities phenomenon. We have to just recognize we are smaller and get smarter and smaller and tougher and just say, okay, we're not going to be what we maybe were, but we're going to be a great city in a different way. So some of that is the triage you need to do. We can't have every cultural institution. We can't have every new development neighborhood. We've got to do the things we need to do and do them very, very well and very smartly. And you see cities, Minneapolis is probably a good example, still struggling a lot, still in some senses, by the way, technically a shrinking city, but completely repositioned the way people think about that city as a growth city. Some of what's already happening in Cleveland is very exciting. The downtown housing, but not just downtown housing, who it's going to. Younger people who are excited about being in Cleveland, some of the startup companies. We're getting there. Some of the initiatives that other people are leading, Albert's leading on trying to get immigration back in Cleveland. Saying, are there other doors that we can open to we're a city of immigrants, all of us. Scratch any one of us, and we're, what, 1 or 2 generations away. Somebody mentioned Forest City was almost 100 years old. Well, it was started by my dad and Albert's dad in the 20s, and they've been in this country for less than, what, 8 years, 7 years? So, how do you bring immigrants back to Cleveland? All sorts of things, and we're moving on a lot of those fronts. There's no single answer, but some of it, I think, is just being honest about, what we're not and what we are, and really selling those things that are good about the city, and they're terrific. So, I'm a little bit of a Cleveland booster, I guess. We all are.
What did Forest City learn from its close vantage point on the 2008 and earlier subprime debt crisis and the wave of residential foreclosures that has been such a burden for our city?
Boy, that's another, that's a little broad. It's funny, I've been crowing a little bit about Stapleton, I'll crow a little more. We did have about 3,000 homes already built at Stapleton when the recession hit. Less than 12 of them went through foreclosure. Some of it is just real value. And clearly, one of the things we learned in Cleveland, and there were a lot, throughout the country, there were a lot of pumped up false home values. They really weren't there, and then a lot of people took out the debt that related to that. We saw that throughout the city. A lot of very predatory lending. Very sad, very difficult for the and the decimated neighborhoods. We're working very hard in partnership with a number of community groups in Slavic Village, and there's an area that got hit, a wonderful community that got hit very, very hard by that. I have no answers other than saying I hope we're smarter next time. The last little comment about that is that there's also this absolute deep-seated belief, it became part of American mythology, that everybody should own their home, and if you didn't, you were a failure. We went up by, I think, from like a traditional 61, 62% home ownership model to almost 70%, including great support from Fannie and Freddie and others, just, buy it, you need a home. There are an awful lot of people at different times of their lives and different points of life that just, for whom single-family home ownership just isn't the right thing. So part of that is just getting more realistic and not believing our own myths. No wisdom on that one. Just hope we don't repeat it again. It was nasty.
Today at the City Club, we've been listening to a special Business Leader Series program featuring Mr. Ron Ratner, Executive Vice President and Director of Forest City Enterprises, and President and CEO of Forest City Residential Group. Thank you, Mr. Ratner, for these very insightful, inspiring, and very candid comments, which are greatly appreciated. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City Club. Have a tremendous Memorial Weekend, and we are adjourned.